Hello guys, my name is Lone Vic, and if you're watching this video, this means that you want to learn how to play Red Rising, the new game from Stonemaier Games by Jamie Stegmaier and Alexander Schmidt. This is basically at its heart a card game for 1 to 6 players, which should last you around an hour to play, and it's based on the novels by Pierce Brown, so if you're a fan, this might be the game for you. Let's take a look at the setup for a 2-player game, which is precisely the same with a little tiny difference in comparison to 3, 4, 5 or 6-player games. Then the rules for playing the game with 2 players, the same as for every other count, and then the setup and the gameplay for Automa, which means the single-player game, or some prefer to call it solo mode. Let's dive in. Okay, so the game is set up right now on the table, as you can see, and I will tell you step by step what to do in order to get it into this state. So first you should place the board on the table, obviously, and this is a twofold board that doesn't really take up much space. Shuffle the deck of character cards, this is this thick deck right here, and place it face down on the board in the designated area in the middle. And the die, this rising sun die, this little cool one, place it somewhere nearby so that everybody has easy access to it. On each of those 4 locations, Jupiter, Mars, Luna and the Institute, draw and place 2 cards from the deck as I did, with the card which is on top covering all of the card below it, apart from the number of victory points, the name and the color. So in each location you have 2 cards. You draw 5 character cards from the deck for each of the players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the player on my left, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the player on my right. Next, the players should select a random house tile. As you can see, those house tiles are with the same reverse sides. I've already made the choice of Apollo and Jupiter, but the players should draw one at random. Take the reference cards in the colors of those houses. You can also give the players those card stands that are supplied with the game as well in the color of the players. I won't be using them for this demo. You should also give the players their influence tokens in the count of 10 and a fleet marker which you place here on the fleet track on the 0 space, all in player colors. The helium tokens in this cool box should be placed below the deck in the designated space as printed on the board. Whoops, the cards moved. The sovereign token, which is this cool metal token in the collector's edition, should be placed somewhere near the board. And if any player house is Apollo, like here, they gain the first player marker, which is the moon, because Apollo always starts first. Otherwise, select the first player randomly, and the turn proceeds clockwise 1 by 1. Now, since this is a 2-player game, there is one additional rule that you have to take 3 influence tokens of any color not used in the game and place them here in the Institute field. And that's the only difference when it comes to the setup for a 2-player game. So now you know how to set up Red Rising. Now let's take a look how to play it in a competitive mode. The first thing is the objectives of the game. Let's talk about this. So how to win, basically. So each player begins with a hand of random characters, those 5 that you drew in the beginning, right? And you have to manipulate this hand during the game by deploying characters to those different areas, activating their abilities and adding new characters from those areas or from the deck to your hand. Those characters will give you victory points at the end of the game, whether by their basic amount of victory points or by the abilities on the cards. Whoever collects the most victory points at the end of the game wins. That's how simple it is. You can also collect victory points through the fleet track and, well, I will tell you about victory points when we will get to the scoring fragment of this movie. So let's dive into the gameplay right now. When it comes to the gameplay, on your turn you must use one of the two actions that you have available. There are only two choices to make. Two only. This is how simple this game is when it comes to the rules, but it's deep. Don't get fooled by this. So your two choices are either lead or scout. And now even the rulebook says that you will be leading a lot more than you will be scouting. You will be scouting mostly when you're satisfied with the cards that you have in your hand and you don't really need any more cards, but you want to do some other things. But usually you will be leading. So let's start with this. So whenever you lead, you select a card from your hand which you want to deploy. And if you are deploying a card, you are deploying it on any of those four spaces, making it the top card on that space. And after you deploy, you have to resolve this deployment action if possible. Well, you must do it, or if the wording is you may, like for example on this card, I don't know if you can see, yes, you may move the bottom card, then this one is optional. But if it's not said, if the word may is not used, you have to resolve this deployment ability. Okay, so let's do a hypothetical, right? I'll play this. I'll play Theodora. As you can see, Theodora has 16 victory points. She interacts with yellow or gold or red cards, and she has a scoring ability at the end of the game here. So I'll go with her, and she's pink, obviously. And I will place her here on Luna, and her ability says you may move the bottom card of this location on top of this card. If it's gold or red, gain it, then end your turn. Unfortunately, the bottom cards of those locations, of any of the locations, are not bottom or red, unfortunately, but I will place this here, so I will be able to move the bottom card of this location to the top on this card. And this is how my action resolved, my deployment action resolved. And to complete the lead action after this, you have to now gain either the top card of a location that you did not use to deploy this turn, so I could take this, this, or this card, right? Not from here, and gain the location bonus, or I can gain the top card from the deck and roll the die and gain a bonus. So if I took this card into my hand, I would activate the ability from Jupiter, which means that I would move my fleet token by 1. If I activated Mars, I would get 1 helium token. If I can't activate Luna, if I activated the Institute, I add 1 influence to the Institute. And if I didn't play a card here and I activated Luna, I would gain the Sovereign token. And whenever you gain the Sovereign token, or whenever you gain or you have a Sovereign token and the game tells you to gain it again and you already have it, you trigger the ability of your house. So in this case, Apollo would have to do what also whenever you gain the Sovereign token, even if you already have it, reveal and place, not deploy, the top card of the deck on any location. So I would take this card, add it to any location, but I wouldn't resolve its ability. Okay, but I am going to take Timony, yes. For each gold at the Institute, place 1 influence. No. The packs. If deployed on Luna, advance on the fleet track. I will grab packs to my hand, and since I took a card from here, I take from Mars, I take 1 helium. And this is my lead action resolved. Now, if I took a card from here instead of taking any one from those locations, I would be rolling this die. And this die has a lot of different abilities, as you can see. Some of them are similar to the ones in the areas. So, if for example I roll the X, I would banish the top card of a location of my choice. What does it mean to banish? You take off the top card and you remove it into the banish pile. And the banish pile is for everybody to see, and sometimes you can interact with the banish pile. If I roll this, I would be able to reveal the top card of the deck and place it on any location. Not deploy, but place. So this is very similar to the ability of Apollo. If I roll this, well, it looks like a sovereign token, right? You guessed it. You gain or keep the sovereign token, and this could trigger also the ability from my card. If I roll this, yes, this exactly, I gain 1 helium token. If I roll, where is it? The blue symbol, I advance on the fleet track, and if I roll this green one, I place 1 influence on the institute. So this is how the die roll is resolved. Okay, so let's do one more lead action just to show you how it looks like. Let's now go for Jupiter, and Jupiter has these 5 cards in hand, and I will do what right now? Let's say that Jupiter wants to dominate the Institute, right? So I will take this card and I will add it here. And this says that when I deploy this card, I place 1 influence on the Institute. So I would add this. And now I can take 1 card from here, here, or from here and roll the die. But I will take the Judge. The Judge has a bit of a different ability because he doesn't have, as you can see, she doesn't have the deploy ability, she has a shield. And this shield means that this ability can protect you from some things that your competitors can do to you. So for example, when an opponent tries to steal or banish any of your cards, reveal this to block them. And reveal, if it isn't followed by banish, means that you just show this card to the other player and then you get it back to your hand. So I took the Judge, some protection for me, this white card, and since I took it from the Institute, I add another influence to the Institute. So this is basically the rule for the lead action. So let's talk about the second action that you will be doing, less frequently maybe. So the scout action this time. During the scout action, you just reveal the top card from the deck. In my case, it's Joppo, the Obsidian Assassin. There you go. And you do not deploy it. You place it on any location, so you don't do this deploy ability, right? And you cover the topmost card of this location and gain that location's bonus. So for example, I will add it here and also gain 1 influence on the Institute. And that's it for the scouting action. And now the game continues like this, turn by turn by turn, until 3 conditions are met by any combination of players, or when any 2 conditions are met by the same player. And those conditions are: a player has 7 or more helium tokens, a player has 7 or more influence on the Institute, and a player reaches or surpasses number 7 on the fleet track. So either different players can fulfill those, right? So 1 player can have 7 here, 1 player has 7 helium, 1 player has 7 here, and then the game ends. Or 1 player is good enough to have 7 helium and 7 influence, for example, on the Institute, and then the game ends automatically. And now, if there is Apollo playing, Apollo takes 1 more turn at the end, and then that's the end of the game. If there is no Apollo player, then the game ends immediately when those conditions are met. And now, before you calculate any scores, there are some cards that have something that's called end of game abilities, and these abilities are marked with this play button, let's say. And this ability says if you have the sovereign token, gain 1 card of your choice from Luna. So for example, if the game ended and I have this in my hand, I would be able to take 1 card from Luna additionally into my hand. So every player, starting from the first player, resolves all of their end of game actions that are on their cards, if any, and then we go to the scoring. And now how does the scoring look? First, you score the points on the cards in the top left corner. Those are fixed values and every card has 1. And then you score the bottom abilities on your cards. For example, the Gardener would give me 5 points for each violet and pink card in my deck. And as you can see, it reacts with violets and pinks. This is a kind of a helper here to remember that, right? So I've got 1 pink, so I would get 5 points, for example, in this case, right? For the garden. This white card, for example, tells me that if you have at least 3 helium, 3 influence on the institute, and at least level 3 on the fleet track, you gain 15 points. So if I had this condition met, I would get those points as well. This one tells me that I get 14 points if this card is in hand with a silver card. So if I have at least 1 silver card in hand, I get 14. This one tells me that if there is at least 1 location with no cards or where the top card is face down, I would get 22 points. And those green cards have this ability to place cards face down, so if I fulfill this condition. The blue one tells me that if with Darrow, Severo, Orion, Virga, or Pelus, gain 15 points. And here you've got those drawings of those heroes that Pax has to be within the deck. So any one of those names would give me 15 points, for example, and so forth and so on. So this is scored first, right? Then you score the fleet track. So the victory points are below your position on the fleet track. So if you are on the first position, you get 1 point, on the second position 3, 6, 10, 15, 21, etc, etc. You get 3 points per helium token in your possession, 3 points per 1 helium token, 3. And if you have the sovereign token at the end of the game, you get 10 points for having the sovereign token. Now, the last thing that gives you positive points are the influence dice on the Institute, and in a 2-player game, those neutral ones count as well. So if the situation was like this at the end of the game, the player who has the most cubes of influence on the Institute, in this case this is the neutral player, would get 10 points per cube. So 3 times 10 is 30, sorry. The second player who is on the Institute with the amount of cubes gets 5 points per each of their cubes. So this one, the blue one, Jupiter, would get 10. And the third player gets only 2 points per cube. And this would be the gold player or the yellow player, Apollo. He would get only 2. So that's the step up, step down, right? So it's 10 for the most, 5 for the second, 2 for the third player. The fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and so forth and so on, whoever is there more gets only 1 point per influence on the Institute as kind of a conciliation prize. And after you do this, you deduct 10 points for every card over 7 in your hand. So in your hand you can have 7 cards and this won't hurt you, but if at the end of the game you've got 8, 9 or 10, you don't discard those cards. Their effects are already resolved, right? But for every card that is over the amount of 7, you lose 10 victory points. And after that, you know who the winner is. Simple as that. So hopefully this helped you clarify how the rules look like in the case of Red Rising and a multiplayer game. If you have any questions, you can leave those questions in the comments below the movie. If you liked my explanation, hit the like button, click the subscribe, click the notification bell. You'll be notified about new videos from me with other how-to plays and reviews and such connected with board games. If you want to find out how to play the Automa for a single player, stick with me. If you're not interested in a solo game of Red Rising, have a great night. It was great seeing you again, and I hope that this is not your last visit to my channel, but the first of many. My name is Lone Vic. Okay, so here we are with the solo mode, and I've reset the board a bit because the setup for Automa is a bit different, so I'll guide you through this step by step. So first things first, we need this deck of 22 cards that are called the Automa cards. So this is the deck of 22 cards. You shuffle this deck, this is how they look on the reverse. You shuffle this deck, and after shuffling, you set 1, 2, 3, 4 cards to the side, and the rest of them will be used as the Automa deck for this game. Then you take the 4 priority cards, A, B, C, and D, with those reverses, you shuffle them as well, and you distribute them between the locations on the board, like so. A is gonna be Jupiter, B is gonna be Mars, D is gonna be Luna, and C is gonna be Institute. That's how good I am at shuffling, basically. Okay, and then you take this Luna bonus card, as you can see, and bear with me here because this can be tricky. And you have to tuck it below the priority card at Luna so that only one of those icons is visible. So you tuck it here, right? And if Luna has the A priority card, then the visible icon should be the icon of the location that has the D priority, and vice versa. If Luna has the B priority, then the visible icon should be the one from the C. So you look at those, right? So in my case, Luna is D, so I look at here, and I look, D is paired with A, and A is on Jupiter. So Jupiter has to be visible from under the D, like so, right? Okay, and now you proceed with the setup for a normal 2-player game. So you add 2 cards per location. Here you are, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. Okay? You give the influence tokens, the first player marker, place the sovereign here, place your fleet marker over there. Those influence tokens can be put aside, the house card for the other player as well. Here are the Automa decks, those 4 cards that I've taken off from the top, the deck that I'll be using, everything is here. During a solo game, you should, the rulebook tells you to remove a few characters from the deck. Characters like Auctioneer, EO, Loan Shark, Psychologist, and Rogue. There are variants described on these cards, for example, special character variants, which allow you to add those characters back to the pool, to the deck, but your first games should be without them. And Automa, I should give 5 cards to the start to the solo player, there you go. Automa starts with 2 cards only, so I'll place those 2 cards here because you place them face down, you don't look at those cards. Automa doesn't gain a house, that's why I've discarded Jupiter, and then the last thing you do is you take this even odd card that you have, right? And this is the Automa scoring on the other side. You take this even odd card and you look at the numbers of victory points on the cards. If there are more evens, you tuck in the even side under the board. If there are more odd, you tuck in the odd side under the board. Remember that 0 is also an even number. And in case of a draw, you pick even. So in my case, it's even, 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 odd, even, even, odd. Well, evens win. So I slide this under the board. This is a reminder that even is what Automa is interested in. And now, for the human player, the game proceeds as usual. There is nothing out of the ordinary in the case of this game. Now, the Automa will take its turns a bit differently based on this deck. Now, when it comes to the player's behavior during this game, if you are playing a solo game, whenever you have to steal a character from Automa or force her to banish one, you banish the bottom character from her deck, the lowest one. And if you activate an ability that allows Automa to gain something for free, she always gains it. She doesn't, she's interested in profit, right? She always decides to do so. And when Automa adds a card to her hand or returns one after revealing it, she always places it on the top of her deck face down. And The reveal ability doesn't work here if you have a card that you have to reveal because there are no other players to show to. That's obvious, I think, right? And when Automa gains the Luna bonus for any reason, so the Sovereign token, she also gains the bonus of the location indicated on the Luna card. So if she would gain the Sovereign token, she also gains the blue bonus of moving her fleet marker. I forgot to add the Automa's fleet marker to the game. Sorry about that. Right, and the influence tokens as well. Automa needs those. Whoopsie. Okay, so after a player takes a turn, and this is the normal turn with a lead action or a scout action, then this is the Automa's turn, right? And Automa takes her turn in a bit of a different procedure. First, if there are no cards left in the Automa deck, you shuffle all the discarded cards, including those 4 that you've removed in the beginning. You shuffle up those, remove 4 from the top again, and you form a new deck. But if there are cards in the deck, you draw the 2 topmost cards, like this, right? And you resolve them one after another. So Automa will basically kind of always move twice, let's say, right? In the order you drew those cards. So fully resolve the first one before the second. And now, Automa tells you that she deploys a character on row marked with priority A. So she places the top card of the character deck, not her hand, the character deck, onto A. And she doesn't use this deploy ability. Automa is not interested in that. Then she gains the top card character from a location in this section that she has here, right? So she deployed this guy here and she takes him to the top of her hand. And if there are any extras over here, for example, you have to resolve them too. This X means that you banish the top card of the character deck, so this one goes to the banish section. If you had a star, well, we'll resolve a star in just a moment. And one thing to notice is that Automa can deploy and take a card from the same row. The players can't, as you remember from the multiplayer game, right? So if you deployed here, you would be able to take a card from these 3 rows, but Automa can deploy and take from the same one. So this card is already resolved, and let's look at this one right now. So Automa deploys to Mars. You've got a symbol of Mars here, so she deploys a card to Mars. Then she takes the card from the D priority, so she would take this. And we have a star icon here. That means that Automa gains the bonus of the location from which she gained the card. So she gained the card from D, so she takes Luna, so she would get the Sovereign token, and she would activate the ability of the blue location, moving her fleet token by 1. And now you will ask, what are those arrows here? Those arrows allow you to select a location for these 2 rows of actions if there are any issues here. So when Automa has to select a location for deployment or gaining a new character, you have to, follow a certain procedure, right? So if there is a location icon anywhere, you use that location. If there is a letter for priority, you use the letter of priority, obviously. And empty locations can never be valid for gaining a character. So when she's gaining a character and in D there are no characters, for example, then she moves according to the arrow. So if D was empty, she would take a character from B because the arrow is pointing to the left. If B was empty as well, she would go to A. If A was empty, she would go to C. I think you can follow that, right? And this bonus as well goes around with the arrows. So for example, if Automa had to gain the bonus from Mars, which is gaining helium, and she already has 10 helium, she would skip to the bonus from Jupiter. If she was 10 on the track and she wasn't able to move further, she would go to the Institute. If she had all the influence tokens on the Institute already and she couldn't add any, she would move to Luna, and so forth and so on, right? Because she would be going left or right, depending on the arrow in this case. And this is it, right? So you resolve those 2 cards, then the player takes his action, then you resolve another 2 cards, and so forth and so on until 2 conditions are met. by one player, or 3 conditions are met by, well, in this case, there are only 2 players, so until the first player meets 2 conditions, basically. There are different difficulty levels, as you can see on the reverse side of the rulebook for Automa. We will talk about those in just a moment because this table will be important. Let's talk about the scoring. So for a normal level of difficulty, Automa scores points the following, because the player scores normally, right? But Automa scores points the following way. So she has a base score of 70. So you add to this base score of 70, you add the steps below. So the points from the fleet track, the points for the helium tokens, the sovereign token, and the influence are counted as with a human player. So that's standard, right? The only thing I forgot is that you are doing a 2-player setup, so there should be 3 neutral tokens here as well. Sorry about that. My bad. Really, really bad. So, okay, you don't score the hand that she has, really. You don't do all those effects. But you take a look through her hand, right? And you separate the cards that are matching and non-matching to her condition. So in this case, her condition is even, so you separate the even cards from the uneven cards. There you go. So these are even, these are uneven, right? And you sort those cards. 0, remember, is even, obviously. And you reduce the Automa's hand to 20 cards, because she will probably have more over those turns. She's collected more. So you discard from the non-matching cards first, and if you discard all of them and she still has 20, you start discarding from the matching cards. And after you discard to 20, Automa gets... Check this out. Automa on normal gets 6 points for cards matching her condition, so she would get 6 points for all the even cards, and she would get 3 points for each non-matching card, right? So let's reiterate, please. In this case, Automa scores the track normally, the helium normally, 10 points for the sovereign token, the tokens on the influence scored normally against the normal player, and after you do this, you take all the cards that she has, you separate them into odds and evens and odds, you take a look at the condition, you reduce the number of cards to 20, starting from the ones that are not matching the condition. After you've reduced to 20 cards, you get the number of points from this table based on which are matching, which are non-matching, and you add the base score of 70 for the Automa, and that's it. Phew. We're done. I hope that I wasn't too confusing with this explanation. Sorry that I forgot about those 3 starting tokens here. Totally popped out of my head in the heat of the moment, let's say. But this is a basic automated game for Red Rising. If you have any questions, if you have any doubts about my explanation, feel free to use the comments. I'm trying to answer successfully, to be honest. I'm answering all of them. If you liked the video, if you liked my explanation and you would like to see more from me or hear more from me, click the notification button, click the subscribe first, obviously, and leave a like under this video. My name is Lone Vic. This was, let me take the box again, this was Red Rising from Stonemaier Games, and it was my how to play version of the game. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great night. Be safe, be healthy. See you next time. Bye bye.